Settle in, because tonight we're about to step into one of the strangest, most secret corners of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Imagine this: an empire stretched across millions of worlds, armies beyond number, towering cathedrals of steel and stone, fleets that could blot out the stars. Yet hidden in the middle of it all is a chapter of warriors so secretive, so mysterious, that most of the Imperium doesn't even know they exist. In fact, if you ever saw them in action, you wouldn't be allowed to remember it. And if you weren't one of the lucky few who got your memory wiped, well, let's just say you probably wouldn't live to tell the tale. These are the Grey Knights. Officially, they are numbered as Chapter 666. Think about that. Out of all the hundreds of Space Marine chapters, theirs is deliberately marked with a number that carries a heavy, grim weight. The Imperium doesn't really do coincidence. Everything means something. And for the Grey Knights, their number isn't just a title. It's a warning, a badge of secrecy, and a grim reminder that they are humanity's final line of defense against things most people can't even admit exist. Now, here's the paradox. In the Imperium of man, the official truth is simple: daemons don't exist. Chaos? Never heard of it. Sorcery? That's just superstition. From the highest noble of terror to the most ordinary worker in some forgotten hive city, the official story is that the galaxy's dangers are physical xenos, heretics, rebels. The warp is just a way to travel, nothing more. But here's the catch. Of course daemons exist. Of course chaos is real. And the Imperium knows it. It just can't ever admit it. The very idea of acknowledging chaos openly is dangerous. To name it is to invite it. To teach about it is to let corruption take root. So the Imperium maintains the lie. That's where the Grey Knights come in. They are the ghost chapter. The Emperor's hidden blade. They're the ones who fight the wars that no one can know about. If a regular Space Marine chapter encounters them on the battlefield, those Marines are later subjected to memory wipes. Entire regiments of the Imperial Guard who happen to witness them in action. Executed. Brutally efficient, yes, but the Imperium is built on keeping secrets, and this is the deepest secret of all. Think about how chilling that is. You're a soldier who's fought for the Imperium all your life. You survive a horrific battle. Watch silver-armored warriors appear like ghosts, banish monsters you can barely comprehend, and then, boom, your story ends right there. Because you can't be allowed to carry that knowledge back to your home, your family, or your comrades. You've seen behind the curtain, and the Imperium doesn't tolerate that. So, who are these warriors really? Let's set the stage. The Grey Knights aren't just another bunch of Space Marines. They're different right down to their DNA. Where other chapters inherit the flaws, quirks, and curses of their primarchs, the Grey Knights were given something far more unnatural. A gene seed unlike any other. Purity, as close to perfect as the Imperium could make it. They're not just soldiers. They're psychic weapons, designed to resist corruption, designed to fight daemons on their own ground. While other Marines can fall to chaos, sometimes whole legions at once, the Grey Knights are immune. Or at least, that's the promise. And unlike most chapters, who are paraded around as icons of imperial might, the Grey Knights are shadows. They don't raise banners for the public to cheer. They don't march in parades. They don't leave monuments behind. Their victories vanish into silence, the worlds they save, the people they protect. Most of them never even realize who saved them. At best, they chalk it up to some miracle. At worst, they never know at all. This makes them tragic heroes in a way. Imagine spending your entire life in service, fighting horrors no one else could even look at without going mad, and knowing that when you succeed, there will be no song, no story, no recognition. That's the weight the Grey Knights carry. And that's why their tale feels different from the usual tales of Space Marines. They are the Emperor's secret weapon, a knife hidden in the folds of his robe, drawn only when all else has failed. Their story begins in the ashes of the Horus Heresy, But before we get there, it's worth pausing on the atmosphere of secrecy again. This is not just about hidden battles or secret weapons. This is about the Imperium's survival strategy. Imagine if the average citizen of the Imperium knew the truth, that daemons were real, that they could slip through the cracks of reality, possess neighbors, twist minds, and turn entire worlds into hellscapes overnight. Fear would spread like wildfire. Despair would follow. Whole planets would crumble under panic. That's why the Grey Knights can't exist publicly. They're the silent answer to a problem most people aren't even allowed to know about. And yet we, the audience, get to look behind that curtain. We get to see what the Imperium denies. That's what makes their lore so compelling. You're not just hearing about another chapter of Marines with a cool name and some fancy armor. You're being let in on the darkest secret of the galaxy, the hidden war that decides whether humanity can even last another day. Their armor is silver, their eyes burn with psychic fire, and their names are chosen not for glory but as weapons themselves, often drawn from ancient texts and twisted into words that demons recoil from. These names are not their own because their past selves are erased. Every recruit who becomes a Grey Knight has their memories wiped clean, their old lives gone. Their new names are like incantations, forged to strike fear into daemons. Think about the psychological weight of that. You don't just leave behind your family, your home, your past. You don't even get to keep your name. You are remade body and soul into something else, something more. The Grey Knights don't fight with numbers. They fight with absolute precision. 1,000 warriors. That's it. 1,000 against a galaxy full of daemons, heretics, and monsters. But each one of them is worth 100 regular Marines when it comes to this kind of war. And that's not exaggeration. It's survival. They are engineered to be incorruptible, trained to resist every temptation, every whisper, every trick the warp can throw. Picture it for a moment, a battlefield on some backwater world, flames licking across broken spires, citizens screaming as daemons pour through rifts in reality. And then, from the smoke, you see silver-armored giants marching forward, their blades glowing with psychic fire, their chants rising in voices that shake the air. These aren't just soldiers. They're walking weapons of faith and psychic power, striking at the heart of chaos itself. And as suddenly as they appear, they're gone. No one remembers them. No one can. Only silence remains. That's the hook. That's the mystery. And that's the tragedy of the Grey Knights. They are a story you're not supposed to hear, warriors you're not supposed to know exist, and legends who will never be celebrated. And yet, without them, the Imperium would have fallen countless times. So, as we begin this journey, keep that in mind. You're not just listening to another tale of war. You're stepping into the shadows, walking alongside the Emperor's most secret sons, and learning about the wars that can never be spoken of. The Grey Knights are more than just warriors. They are a paradox, pure yet created, loyal yet hidden, victorious yet forgotten. And tonight, we'll peel back that silence part by part until the whole picture comes into focus. When we left off, we set the stage for the Grey Knights as this hidden blade of the Imperium, a chapter shrouded in secrecy, born out of necessity. But now let's step back into the moment of their creation, because the circumstances of their birth tell you everything you need to know about why they had to exist. The story begins in the final days of the Horus Heresy. Imagine the galaxy then, burning, broken, torn apart by civil war. Brother fought brother. Legions that once marched side by side under the Emperor's banners now turned their guns on each other. Half the Primarchs had fallen to chaos, dragging their legions with them, and the very survival of humanity was hanging by a thread. The final Siege of Terra loomed. Horus, once the favored son, was now the arch-traitor, and the Emperor, for all his godlike power, could see what was coming next. Yes, he would fight Horus. Yes, he would win, though at a terrible cost. But even if Horus fell, chaos would not vanish. The daemons wouldn't just give up and go home. The ruinous powers don't work like that. They don't need legions or fleets. They seep in through cracks, through whispers, through temptation. The Emperor understood this in a way few others did. He knew that once he was trapped on the Golden Throne, bound to the machinery that kept Terra safe, he would no longer be able to fight chaos directly. Humanity would need a weapon that could fight in his place. Not just soldiers, not just marines. Something more. So, while the galaxy burned, the Emperor made a plan, and he handed it to the one man he trusted most, Malcador the Sigillite. Now, Malcador isn't always a household name, but in the lore of Warhammer, he is perhaps the single most important human outside of the Emperor himself. He was the Emperor's right hand, his confidant, his spymaster, his scholar, and his weapon all rolled into one. When the Emperor needed something done in secret, Malcador was the one who got it done. And the founding of the Grey Knights was his greatest mission. Malcador's task was simple in words, impossible in practice: find the worthiest warriors in the Imperium. Men who had survived the firestorm of the heresy without breaking, who had looked chaos in the eye and said no. And not just loyalists. Malcador was willing to dig through traitor legions too, searching for those rare individuals who hadn't fallen, who had resisted their Primarch's corruption. It didn't matter where they came from. What mattered was their loyalty to the Emperor alone. And so Malcador formed what became known as the Knights Errant. This was no ordinary band. These were chosen warriors plucked from the edges of despair, men with broken legacies but unbroken wills. Some were librarians cast out by their legions. Some were survivors of massacres. Some were warriors haunted by regret. But all of them shared one thing. They refused to give themselves over to chaos. In total, Malcador gathered 12. 8 Space Marines, 4 Lords of Terra. Those 4 human lords would go on to become the foundation of the Inquisition. The 8 Marines, however, would become something entirely new, the founding Grand Masters of the Grey Knights. Now, picture this moment. The Emperor, battered but unbowed, preparing for the final duel with Horus. Malcador assembling his secret council. 12 figures stand before them, carrying the weight of the galaxy's last hope. Each one with scars, each one with ghosts, but each chosen for a reason. From the shadows of the traitor legions came warriors who had refused to bend. From the loyalist legions came men who had seen too much to ever go back. It's worth pausing here, because this is what makes the Grey Knights different from any other chapter. Regular Space Marines are tied to their Primarchs. They carry their father's flaws, their father's strengths, their father's history. The Grey Knights, they were born out of betrayal and ruin, but they carried no such ties. Their loyalty wasn't to a Primarch, it was to the Emperor himself. That severed link is what made them incorruptible, or at least as close as anyone could be. Among them was Janus, once Revul Arvida of the Thousand Sons. Think about the irony of that. A warrior born from a legion that fell to sorcery and daemon worship, now chosen to become one of the Emperor's purest weapons. He was afflicted by the flesh change, the mutation that plagued his legion, but Malcador saved him by merging him with a shard of Magnus's soul. That alone tells you how strange and twisted the Grey Knights' origins are. The Emperor and Malcador weren't afraid to play with fire, if it meant forging a blade sharp enough to cut through the warp. Then there was Epimetheus, once of the Dark Angels. Scarred, hooded, a survivor of war so brutal that his face itself had become a mask of pain. He would go on to lead the Preservers, one of the Grey Knight brotherhoods. Chiron, once fell Jaros of the Night Lords, hated what his legion had become. Murderers who killed for joy. Cast out, left wandering, he was brought into Malcador's fold and given a new purpose. His story is one of redemption, turning shame into strength. There was Caius, once Tylos Rubio of the Ultramarines, of Psyche, who had been silenced by the Emperor's own edict at Nicaea, forced to hide his gift. His silence cost his brothers dearly, and his regret weighed so heavily on him that he swore never again to deny his powers. In the Grey Knights he found absolution. And others from the Raven Guard, the Lunar Wolves, the Space Wolves, the Blood Angels. All scarred, all carrying pasts filled with loss, but all reforged into something new. The key moment came when Malcador did something unheard of. He stripped them of their gene seed. Everything that tied them back to their old legions was removed. In its place, a new gene seed. One crafted with the gift of the Emperor. No flaws, no corruption, no weaknesses. This was the biological foundation of the Grey Knights. They weren't just Marines remade. They were Marines reborn. So, in the dying days of the heresy, while the walls of the Imperial Palace shook under Horus's bombardments, the seeds of Chapter 6 and 66 were planted. The Emperor would go on to duel Horus. He would triumph, but at the cost of his own body, his soul bound to the Golden Throne. And while he sat in silence, unable to walk the galaxy, the Grey Knights would rise in the shadows, ready to fight the battles he could no longer fight. That's the paradox of the Grey Knights. They were created in secret, at the most desperate hour of humanity's history, not to be heroes celebrated in song, but to be weapons wielded in silence. And from the moment of their birth they were already different. Cut free from their past, tied only to the Emperor, immune to corruption, and sworn to fight enemies that officially don't exist. This is where their true story begins. Because after the war, after the ashes settled, these 8 Grand Masters and their followers would be sent to a place far from prying eyes, a place hidden even from the records of the Imperium, a cold, distant moon called Titan. The heresy ended in fire, in silence, and in the Emperor's sacrifice. Terra was left a scarred world, its skies blackened with ash, its streets littered with the bones of countless warriors. The Emperor was entombed on the Golden Throne, and humanity stood at the edge of collapse. But even in that ruin, the seed of something new had already been planted. The Grey Knights were not yet a chapter, not yet 1,000 warriors strong. They were still an idea, a secret experiment forged in desperation. And now that idea needed a home. Malcador the Sigillite had prepared for this moment. While the Emperor had fought Horus in the palace, Malcador had been working in the shadows, weaving plans within plans, and one of his greatest secrets was waiting far beyond Terra's broken walls. Saturn's moon Titan. Now, Titan was no ordinary moon. To the outside eye, it was just another frozen rock circling Saturn, covered in ice and methane seas. But Malcador had seen something there, or perhaps he had made something there. The records are deliberately vague. What we do know is that when the time came to hide his chosen warriors, Malcador performed one of the greatest sorcerer's feats of the age. He cloaked Titan in the warp itself. He made it vanish. To everyone else in the galaxy, Titan was simply gone, erased, destroyed, unthinkable. But in reality, it had slipped out of the material universe and into a pocket of secrecy. Why Titan? Some say it was the raw psychic energy tied to Mount Anarch, a vast black mountain at the moon's heart. Others believe it was chosen simply because of its remoteness. But whatever the reason, Titan became the cradle of the Grey Knights. And on its frozen surface, in the shadow of that mountain, a fortress began to rise. This was no simple fortress monastery. It wasn't just barracks and chapels. It was a labyrinth, a temple, a vault, a prison, and a training ground all at once. Its walls were forged not just from ceramite and adamantium, but from wards, sigils, and psychic seals. Its corridors buzzed with restrained energy, as if the stones themselves were humming with power. And at its center, standing tall like a black spire piercing the clouds, was the Aurum, the beating heart of Grey Knight prophecy. Inside the Aurum, the prognosticators performed their rituals. These were psychers trained to read the warp like a map, to detect the faintest ripple of demonic intrusion. Imagine standing at the edge of a black ocean and feeling a single drop fall into it from 1,000 miles away. That's the kind of sensitivity they had to develop. Thanks to them, the Grey Knights could prepare for battles before daemons even fully manifested. It wasn't just foresight, it was survival. But Titan wasn't just about mysticism. It was also about blood, sweat, and death. New recruits were brought to the trial chambers. These weren't volunteers in the way we might think of it. They were selected, hunted down, plucked from across the galaxy. Many were latent psychers discovered on primitive worlds, men who didn't even know what they were until the black ships came. Others were drawn from broken regiments, or even from families who would never know what happened to their sons. And then the culling began. The process was brutal. For every one recruit who survived, 99 died. Some perished during training, their bodies broken under impossible trials. Others burned out under psychic testing, their minds unable to withstand the pressure. And some were destroyed in the final step, the implantation of the Grey Knight's unique gene seed. It wasn't just biology, it was transformation. It meant becoming something no longer entirely human, no longer tied to the flaws of a primarch, but reshaped into the Emperor's perfect daemon slayer. For those who survived, everything was erased. Their old memories, their old names, even the tiniest fragments of who they had been. Imagine walking into a room one person and leaving it with nothing but a number. No family, no past, no story, only the Order, only the Emperor, only the war ahead. When they finally earned their place, they were given new names. Names chosen through psychic divination, often drawn from twisted forms of ancient demonic words. These weren't names for comfort. They were names designed to terrify the enemies of mankind. Every time a daemon heard its own warped syllables spoken by a Grey Knight, it recoiled, reminded of its defeat. The fortress grew with them. The Sanctum Sanctorum was built deep within the monastery, a place so holy, so forbidden, that only the highest among the Grey Knights could even approach it. Here, the original Liber Demonica was kept, a tome of every demon, every curse, every rite of banishment ever recorded. Around it, shelves upon shelves of ancient scrolls, data crystals, and forbidden volumes. Knowledge so dangerous that to read it unprepared would be to invite madness. And yet here it was studied, catalogued, used as a weapon. And hidden deeper still were the Tesseract labyrinths. These weren't Imperial creations at all. They were Necron in origin, perfect prisons of folded space, cubes designed to trap entities made of pure energy. With them, the Grey Knights could bind a daemon not just in the material world, but lock its essence away forever, cutting it off from the warp. The irony, of course, is that these weapons were born of humanity's sworn enemies. To create purity, the Emperor and Malcador weren't afraid to make deals with the most unlikely of sources. That's the hidden theme here, survival. As the years passed, Titan became more than just a hidden base. It became a myth in its own right. The warp outside churned endlessly, but within the fortress, the Grey Knights trained, studied, and waited. Time passed differently there, twisted by the warp. While mere years slipped by in the Imperium, decades passed on Titan. By the time the moon re-merged into real space during the second founding, the Grey Knights were already prepared, already trained, already forged into a chapter. And when they finally stepped into the light again, they didn't come as a ragged handful. They came as 1,000 warriors, already organized into their brotherhoods, already clad in silver, already armed with nemesis blades that seemed to glow with psychic fire. For the Inquisition, those 4 lords of terror who had become its first inquisitors, it was like watching a plan written in blood and shadow come to fruition. The Grey Knights were slotted into Imperial records as Chapters 6 and 66, a number no one dared to question. And just like that, they became official, but only in the most hidden, classified sense of the word. Here's the part that strikes me most when I think about Titan. Imagine being one of those first recruits. You've lost everything. Your name, your past, even your memories. You've endured pain that killed nearly everyone beside you. You've seen things that would shatter most men's minds. And now you're standing in the Hall of Champions, surrounded by statues of heroes you'll never meet, carrying a sword forged not just of steel, but of psychic fire. and your only purpose is to step into battles that no one else will ever know happen. That is the life of a Grey Knight. And as Titan's fortress grew stronger, so did their reputation in the shadows. Daemons learned to fear them. Chaos cults whispered of them. And yet, for the Imperium at large, they were still nothing more than rumor. That's the paradox again. Their fortress was grand, their power unmatched. But their victories were destined to be silent. And that silence only grew deeper as the brotherhoods began to take shape. Each had its own role, its own focus, its own traditions. And in those traditions we can start to see how the Grey Knights became more than just soldiers. They became an order, almost monastic, a fusion of warrior and priest, blade and book. By the time Titan reemerged from the warp, the Grey Knights weren't just a handful of survivors anymore. They were organized, structured, disciplined, and at the heart of that structure were the brotherhoods. Now, on the surface, these might sound like the companies of a normal Space Marine chapter. But with the Grey Knights, everything has a purpose, and nothing is ordinary. Each brotherhood isn't just a fighting unit. It's a philosophy, a way of war, a reflection of the hidden battle they were made to fight. There are 8 brotherhoods in total, each led by a Grand Master, and sitting above them all, guiding them, is the Supreme Grand Master, the chapter's leader. But unlike other chapters, the Grey Knights don't just rely on one man's authority. The Grand Masters form a council, and each voice matters. That way no single warrior, no matter how powerful, can drag the order into madness or corruption. It's a safeguard, and when you're standing toe-to-toe with daemons, safeguards matter. So let's walk through these brotherhoods, because each one tells us something about how the Grey Knights fight, and why they're so terrifying to the enemies of mankind. The first brotherhood is called the Swordbearers. Think of them as the masters of the chapter's machines. They oversee the sacred arsenal, from the thunderous land raiders to the storm ravens that streak across the battlefield. They aren't just pilots, they're caretakers. Their Grand Master, Varden Kai, doesn't just hand out war gear, he blesses it, maintains it, and ensures it's always ready. To the Swordbearers, a malfunction isn't just a mistake, it's heresy. Their brotherhood embodies preparation, making sure that when a daemon invasion begins, the Grey Knights' weapons never falter. Then there's the second brotherhood, the Blades of Victory. If the first are meticulous, the second are fast. These are the strike specialists, the ones who teleport directly into an enemy's rear lines and tear it apart before the foe even realizes what's happening. They're the storm, sudden and overwhelming. Their Grand Master, Vort Mordrak, also serves as Admiral of the Grey Knights' fleet, which means he doesn't just lead battles. He decides when and where to strike. Sometimes, thanks to the chapter's prognosticators, they arrive before the enemy even finishes opening the warp rift. Imagine that daemons barely crawling into reality, only to be met with silver-armored giants already waiting with blades raised. The third brotherhood is the Wardmakers. This one carries a heavy legacy. They trace their roots back to Janus, the first Supreme Grand Master. They are steeped in psychic power, filled with librarians who can bend the warp itself to the Emperor's will. Heroes like Kaldor Draigo began their rise here. To the Wardmakers, the warp is not just a battlefield, it's a canvas. They etch runes, cast wards, weave protective circles, and unleash psychic storms that can incinerate whole hosts of daemons. Their current leader, Arven Stern, is himself a legend. If the Grey Knights have a mystical heart, it beats inside the third brotherhood. Next, we have the fourth brotherhood, known as the Prescient Brethren. Their role is foresight. They oversee the prognosticators, the seers who watch the warp for ripples of coming invasions. These Grey Knights are trained to see the unseen, to predict where daemons will strike, and to prepare accordingly. Their Grand Master Dristan Crom carries the title of Keeper. And in a way, that says it all. He keeps the future, keeps the warnings, keeps the order prepared for what's to come. Without the Prescient Brethren, The Grey Knights would constantly be reacting. With them, they are always one step ahead. The fifth Brotherhood is the Preservers. Their focus isn't just combat, it's survival. They are the apothecaries, the guardians of the chapter's gene seed, the ones who tend to the wounded and oversee the dreadnoughts. Their work is sacred, because the Grey Knight's gene seed is priceless. It's the gift of the Emperor, a strain of DNA unlike any other, untainted and incorruptible. Losing even one sample is catastrophic. So the Preservers guard it with their lives. Their Grand Master Rothmorven bears the title Defender of the Sanctum. He watches over the most precious resource the chapter has, its very bloodline. The sixth Brotherhood is the Rapiers. If their name sounds sharp, that's because their style is surgical. They strike precisely, cutting deep into the enemy without wasting time on artillery barrages or drawn-out bombardments. They move in fast, eliminate the threat, and move out, often supported by servitors that act as distractions. For the Grey Knights, every warrior lost is a tragedy. They don't have endless numbers. The Rapiers specialize in minimizing those losses while still breaking the enemy. Their Grand Master Anvil Lon is respected as a surgeon of war. He doesn't just fight battles, he carves them open. Now we come to the seventh Brotherhood, the Exactors. These are the diplomats of the Grey Knights, or at least as close as the Order gets to diplomacy. They are the link between the chapter and the Ordo Malleus of the Inquisition. They receive intelligence, requisition support troops, and often fight alongside the Imperial Guard when needed. But here's the grim part. Those guardsmen rarely survive. Those who do are often mind-wiped or turned into servitors. The Exactors are the face the Imperium sees, but it's a cold face. Their Grand Master, Coven Lear, is both a warrior and a representative. When he speaks with the authority of the Inquisition itself. Finally, the eighth Brotherhood, the Silver Blades. These are the trainers, the mentors, the ones who take in raw recruits and shape them into Grey Knights. Their Grand Master, Aidan Perrin, oversees the initiation rites and the constant drilling of new warriors. Some recruits remain here for life, dedicating themselves to endless training and refinement. The Silver Blades are the chapter's forge, hammering new steel again and again, ensuring the Order never withers. Beyond these eight, there are two special groups worth mentioning, the Purifiers and the Paladins. The Purifiers are chosen for one reason. Their souls are utterly, flawlessly pure. So pure that their psychic powers burn with azure flame, scoring daemons not just physically but spiritually. They are fanatics, but fanatics in the best way. They guard the most dangerous relics beneath Mount Anarch, including evils so ancient that even the Grey Knights dare not name them. To become a Purifier is not a reward. It's a burden. It means carrying the weight of purity itself. And then there are the Paladins, the elite of the elite. To even attempt the trials to become one, a Grey Knight must endure ordeals that would kill most warriors outright. Nights in the cursed caves of Mount Anarch. Battles against demonic heralds without armor or wards. Journeys to cursed moons where the air itself whispers corruption. And when all the trials are complete, only then does a warrior earn the right to stand as a paladin, personal guard to the Grand Masters, guardians of the chapter's most sacred duties. Each brotherhood, each special order forms a piece of the whole. Together, they are the Grey Knights, not just a chapter but a brotherhood of brotherhoods. 1,000 warriors, each carrying a unique role, each sharpening the blade that is Chapter 666. What makes this structure so compelling is that it mirrors the way chaos itself works. Daemons attack from every angle, through whispers, through brute force, through trickery, through possession. And the Grey Knights respond in kind, with foresight, with speed, with strength, with purity. Every brotherhood is a countermeasure, every role a defense. It's not just war, it's balance. And yet, for all their structure, for all their strength, the Grey Knights are still more than their brotherhoods. They are defined by their weapons, their relics, their sacred tools forged to cut through the Imperium itself. Because when you're standing against a greater daemon, steel alone isn't enough. If the brotherhoods are the heart of the Grey Knights, then their weapons are the edge of the blade. Because here's the truth when you're fighting daemons. Regular bolters and chainswords just don't cut it. You can't swing steel at a creature made of thought and nightmare and expect it to care. To kill a daemon, you need something more. You need weapons that bite not just into flesh, but into the very essence of the war. And that's exactly what the Grey Knights carry into battle. The most iconic of their arsenal are the Nemesis weapons. Just saying the name feels heavy, Nemesis. These aren't just power weapons. They're psychic amplifiers, forged to resonate with the minds of their wielders. Imagine a sword that doesn't just slice because it's sharp, but because it channels your will, your rage, your purity into every strike. That's what a Nemesis blade does. Each one is individually attuned to the knight who wields it. In a sense, they grow together. The stronger the psyker, the sharper the cut, the deadlier the glow. There are many forms. Nemesis force swords, elegant and precise, glowing with runes. Halberds long and sweeping, perfect for cleaving through ranks of lesser daemons. Falchions, twin blades wielded in tandem. Ideal for warriors who prefer speed over brute force. And then there are the hammers. Massive two-handed mauls that crash down like thunder, each swing amplified by psychic energy that ripples out like a shockwave. To watch a Grey Knight swing one of these is to watch a mountain collapse onto a battlefield. But not all weapons are meant for close combat. The Grey Knights are masters of ranged psychic weaponry too. Their storm bolters are more than just upgraded marine guns. Many of them fire specially blessed ammunition, inscribed with wards and filled with psi-bolts that tear through daemonic essence. Then there are the silencers, weapons that don't even fire bullets. Instead, they channel pure psychic force through crystalline cores, blasting enemies with bolts of raw mind energy. A silencer doesn't just pierce armor. It rips apart sanity, shredding the very presence of the daemon it hits. And then there's the psi-cannon. This one's a fan favorite. Picture a heavy bolter, already a beast of a weapon, but re-engineered to hurl psychically charged shells that detonate with devastating bursts of warp-infused fire. It's not just about physical damage. It's about unraveling the warp threads that hold a daemon together. Against mortals, it's terrifying. Against daemons, it's lethal. Of course, sometimes the simplest weapons are the most iconic. The incinerators, the Grey Knights' heavy flamers, are built to cleanse. Their fuel is mixed with blessed oils, consecrated rituals, and psychic charge. When they roar to life, they don't just burn flesh, they scar souls. To a daemon, the touch of that fire is agony beyond words. To a cultist, it's like being swallowed in the Emperor's judgment. Entire cult gatherings have been reduced to ash in seconds by a squad of Grey Knights unleashing incinerators in unison. And we can't forget the most controversial, the most imposing weapon system in their arsenal, the Nemesis Dreadknight. Now, if you've ever seen artwork of this thing, you'll know it looks unusual. Some call it a baby carrier, because the pilot is strapped to the front of the exoskeleton rather than encased inside. But jokes aside, the Dreadknight is an absolute monster on the battlefield. It's not a sarcophagus-bound dreadnought. It's a living Grey Knight, his body wired directly into an adamantium exosuit, every movement amplified 100-fold, every psychic surge channeled into weapons larger than tanks. These machines were built with one purpose in mind, to go toe-to-toe with greater daemons. And they do it. Few things in the Imperium can match the sight of a Dreadknight striding across a battlefield, hammer raised, as warp-spawned horrors scatter before it. Their armor deserves a whole story of its own. Standard Space Marine power armor is already impressive, but Grey Knights wear something unique: Aegis armor. On the outside, it looks familiar. Plates of ceramite, adamantium joints, lenses glowing faintly red. But inside, it's something else entirely. The Aegis is lined with a crystalline matrix designed to channel psychic energy. Think of it like a shield woven into the armor itself. Every rune, every inscription etched into its surface amplifies the wearer's natural abilities, reinforcing their mind against corruption. A Grey Knight doesn't just wear his armor, he becomes part of it. Together, knight and armor project a psychic field that makes them almost untouchable to demonic corruption. Where a normal marine might hesitate when picking up a cursed relic, a Grey Knight can grasp it barehanded and remain untainted. Where a normal human would go insane reading a heretical tome, a Grey Knight can study it, memorize it, and use it as a weapon. Their very purity, magnified by the ages, turns the enemy's tools against them. And there's one more thing every Grey Knight carries inside his armor, the Liber Daemonica. This isn't a book in the way we might think of it. It's a psychic imprint, a copy of the original tome that sits deep in Titan's sanctum. Each knight has his own version filled with rites, wards and prayers designed to banish daemons. It's more than a manual. It's a spiritual anchor. In the chaos of battle, with the warp pressing in, those sacred words carved into their very armor remind them who they are, why they fight, and what they're sworn to destroy. If that wasn't enough, some of the Grey Knights ward your borders on legend. Take the Titan sword, for instance, said to have been forged by the Emperor himself and passed down through the Order's greatest leaders, or the countless Nemesis blades blessed in rituals older than most imperial worlds. Every weapon is more than steel. It's a relic, a story, a ward against damnation. And because the Grey Knights answer only to the Inquisition, they don't play by the same rules as other chapters. They experiment. They bend traditions. They wield artifacts the Mechanicus would call heresy. Their secrecy gives them freedom, and their mission demands it. When your job is to slay daemons, the line between sacred and forbidden blurs quickly. Picture a battlefield now. Smoke, fire, a city in ruins. From a rift in the sky, daemons pour down like a tide of nightmares. And then the Grey Knights arrive. Silver-armored giants, storm bolters barking, psychic halberds glowing, every step forward like a hymn of war. The ground trembles as a dread knight lands, hammer raised high. The air crackles with psychic energy as the wards on their armor burn bright. And in that moment, against the backdrop of horror, humanity has a chance. That's the power of their weapons. They don't just kill. They cleanse. They purify. They banish. And in doing so, they turn the tools of chaos back on itself. But as impressive as their wardure is, the true legends of the Grey Knights aren't forged from metal. They're forged from the deeds of the warriors themselves. Men who step into the warp and emerge unbroken. Men whose names daemons whisper in fear. Men like Kaldor Draigo, whose story is so wild it almost feels like myth. Every army has its legends. Every chapter has its heroes. But with the Grey Knights, their heroes take on a different weight. Because when your entire existence is wrapped in secrecy, the stories that survive aren't tales told to inspire recruits or impress imperial citizens. They're whispered in hidden libraries, etched in forbidden scrolls, and remembered only by those who stand within the Brotherhood. And yet, somehow these stories are so immense, so impossible, that even daemons in the warp whisper their names with fear, and none of those names looms larger than Kaldor Draigo. Now, if you've been around the Warhammer universe for a while, you've probably heard his name spoken with a kind of awe. To some, he's the Imperium's unstoppable warrior, a man cursed to fight forever in the warp. To others, he's a symbol of the strange, over-the-top nature of Grey Knight lore. But whatever angle you take, one thing is undeniable: Draigo is the Grey Knight's living legend. His story begins like so many others, with duty. Draigo rose through the ranks of the Grey Knights, eventually becoming Grand Master of the Third Brotherhood, the Wardmakers. He wasn't just a powerful psyker or skilled fighter. He was the kind of leader others gravitated toward. Stern, relentless, and utterly uncompromising. His rise was steady, inevitable. And then came the battle that defined him forever. The Battle of Cornovan, the setting a world under siege by the Death Guard, led by none other than Mortarion, the daemon primarch himself. Mortarion was a monster of decay, a walking plague, his presence enough to rot crops, rust metal, and sicken entire populations. Draigo's predecessor, the Supreme Grand Master Geronton, stood against him and fell. Mortarion crushed him, mocking the Grey Knights and tainting the battlefield with his corruption. But Draigo was there, and he would not let that insult stand. He strode into battle, his nemesis sword blazing with psychic fire, and challenged a daemon primarch head-on. Think about that. Most Astartes would tremble at the sight of such a creature. Draigo didn't hesitate. He fought with a fury born not just of strength, but of purity. And in that duel he did something no one expected. He won. Draigo drove Mortarion back, cutting through his diseased flesh, and in a final act of defiance, he carved Geronton's name into the Primarch's diseased heart. Imagine the insult that represents a being of pure corruption, scarred forever by the memory of a Grey Knight's fallen brother. Mortarion screamed, his roar echoing across reality itself, and Draigo, bloodied but unbroken, stood as proof that even the mightiest daemon could be humbled. But victory came at a price. Not long after, Draigo faced another daemon prince, Mkar, a creature of Tianch. This battle didn't end the way Draigo planned. With his last strength, Mkar cursed Draigo, dragging him bodily into the warp. For most men, that would be the end. The warp isn't a place you walk into and survive. It's madness incarnate, a realm of gods and monsters where even the strongest souls are shredded or twisted. But Draigo didn't break. Instead, he became something else entirely. A ghost wandering the Imperium. A warrior cursed to fight forever within the heart of chaos itself. And fight he did. There are stories of Draigo slaying a bloodthirster atop a waterfall of blood, taking its axe, splitting it apart, and reforging it into a new nemesis blade. There are stories of him setting fire to Nurgle's own garden, leaving rot and decay smouldering in flames that burned for centuries. He has fought greater daemons, warped beasts, and legions of horrors, all within their own domains, and emerged victorious every time. He is a living wound carved into the heart of chaos. And here's the craziest part: he still appears. Every now and then, in moments of dire need, Draigo pushes his way back into real space. Maybe it's a prophecy. Maybe it's the Emperor's will. Maybe it's just sheer stubbornness. But in those moments, the Grey Knights fight side by side with their greatest hero, a man who should have been lost forever, yet refuses to be erased. And then, just as suddenly, he's gone again, pulled back into the warp to continue his eternal war. It's almost mythic, isn't it? Like a ghostly knight riding in at the darkest hour, helping turn the tide, then vanishing into legend. To the daemons, Draigo is a nightmare that never ends. To the Grey Knights, he's a promise that even the warp itself cannot break their order. But Draigo isn't the only legend among them. Far from it. Take Janus, the very first Supreme Grand Master. His origins are tangled, mysterious, and controversial. Some say he was Revul Arvida of the Thousand Suns, saved from the flesh change by Malcador himself, merged with a shard of Magnus's soul. Whether that's true or not, Janus was proof of the Emperor's gamble, a being forged from both light and shadow, standing as the leader of a chapter built to resist corruption. His legacy shaped everything the Grey Knights became. Or look at Epimetheus, once a dark angel, scarred and hooded, who carried the burden of survival through wars that consumed countless others. He became the Grand Master of the Preservers, overseeing the chapter's sacred gene seed, and protecting its continuity across millennia. His choice to spend 10,000 years in stasis guarding the damnation cache is a story in itself. Dedication so absolute it borders on myth. And then there's Chiron, once fell Jarrows of the Night Lords. Cast out by his own legion, disgusted by their cruelty, he found redemption in the Grey Knights. He went from exile to Grand Master of the Eighth Brotherhood. The Silver Blades, training recruits to follow the path he had carved out of shame. His life is a story of redemption, proving that even those born in darkness can become lights against it. Each Grand Master has a story like this. Caius, once Tylos Rubio of the Ultramarines, haunted by regret at his silence during Calth, who found new strength as a Grey Knight. Yup, a lunar wolf who refused to follow Horus into treachery. Jotun, a space wolf rune priest mutilated by Conrad Curse, resurrected by Imperial technology, turned into a Grand Master of Titan, Satra. A Blood Angels librarian who hated his own Primarch, but found purpose in serving the Emperor's hidden order. Together, these men weren't just founders. They were walking testaments to what the Grey Knights are about: purity, not as a gift, but as a choice. They weren't born flawless. They were forged through suffering, loss, and betrayal, and remade into something greater. Even beyond the Grand Masters, the Grey Knights have heroes etched into their hidden halls. Hyperion, who fought Angron himself during the First War for Armageddon, breaking the Daemon Primarch's blade with nothing but psychic power and faith. Garen Crow, the Purifier, who carries the Black Blade of Antwerp, a daemon weapon that whispers promises of glory and damnation into his mind every waking moment. Any other man would have fallen. Crow resists day after day, carrying the cursed blade not for power, but to ensure no one else is tempted by it. His life is one of constant battle, not against daemons on the battlefield, but against the voice in his own head. What makes these legends so compelling isn't just the battles they fought, or the monsters they slew. It's the cost. The Grey Knights don't get monuments. They don't get songs sung about them in the streets of Terra. Their victories are erased, their sacrifices forgotten, their names remembered only in the echoing halls of Titan. And yet, they keep fighting. For most people in the Imperium, these men don't even exist. For the daemons of the warp, they're living nightmares. And for us, peering into the shadows, they are proof that in the grimdark of the far future, even in silence, even in secrecy, humanity still produces heroes who refuse to break. These are the legends of the Grey Knights. Myths in silver armor. Warriors cursed to fight without recognition. And yet, in every whispered story, in every hidden record, you feel the same message: the warp can corrupt. It can tempt, it can twist, but it cannot conquer the will of a true Grey Knight. And with their heroes set, with their names whispered in both fear and reverence, we turn now to the stories of the wars themselves. The strange, brutal, and sometimes heartbreaking campaigns the Grey Knights have fought in silence. Because if their legends feel impossible, wait until you hear about the battles they've fought, when the rest of the Imperium wasn't even looking. The Grey Knights are defined not just by who they are, but by what they do. And what they do is fight wars no one else dares to fight. Wars no one else is allowed to even acknowledge. Wars so strange, so brutal, so hidden that if you piece them all together, you'd see a side of the Imperium almost no one believes is real. These aren't campaigns that get commemorated in Imperial records. You won't find statues of Grey Knights planted in city squares. These are battles erased the moment they're over, their witnesses silenced, their very existence denied. But within the halls of Titan, the names of these battles echo like grim hymns, reminders of why the Grey Knights exist in the first place. Take, for example, the Silent Heresy. On the surface, it sounds like the title of some obscure text, but it was a nightmare made real. On a world called Sundal, the followers of Xianch cast a spell so vast it stripped speech itself from every living throat. Imagine it in an entire planet where, in one instant, no one could speak. No cries of alarm, no desperate prayers, no screams of pain, just silence, utter, suffocating silence. The cultists took advantage of that silence to slaughter at will. Families couldn't call for help. Soldiers couldn't shout warnings. Every act of violence became eerily quiet, the world turning into a hushed charnel house. When the Grey Knights arrived, what they found was a planet of corpses, rotting in mute streets, while survivors cowered in silence, unable to even cry out when daemons dragged them away. And then came the clash. Storm bolters barked, cannons roared, Incinerators lit up the night, but still, not a word was spoken by the people they tried to save. It was the Grey Knights themselves, chanting wards and banishments that brought sound back to that dying world. When it was over, Sundal was little more than a graveyard. The daemons banished, the cult destroyed, but the silence lingered. And so, the story of the silent heresy became a caution within Titan, a reminder of how fragile reality can be when chaos whispers. Not every war was so quiet. Some were grotesque in their spectacle. On the planet of Garada, a governor thought he was putting on a show of imperial strength. He arranged for the execution of 666 heretics, all in one massive public ceremony. Banners flew, trumpets sounded, people gathered as if it were some kind of carnival. Cotton candy balloons, laughter in the streets. And then, as the last heretic's life was snuffed out, the ritual was complete. A warp rift tore open right there in the heart of the crowd. Daemons poured through by the thousands. The governor himself was possessed by a daemon prince of Slaanesh, who transformed the festival into a nightmare of bloody games. Survivors were forced into arenas, where they either fought for their lives or were hurled screaming into the warp. When the Grey Knights arrived, they had to cut through mazes of living flesh, walls that bled and screamed, corridors pulsing like organs. They carved their way to the throne of the possessed governor, where he sat atop a mountain of corpses. 20 Grey Knights fell that day, but in the end the rift was sealed, not with sorcery, but with sacrifice. The knights piled the bodies of innocent citizens over the heretics' corpses, using the blood of the pure to choke off the madness. A cruel practice, but a necessary one. For the Grey Knights, mercy and horror often walk hand in hand. Then there was the war on Rios. This wasn't about daemons bursting out of thin air. It started as a civil war, sparked by a treacherous planetary governor. He had convinced his armies to rise up against the Imperium, raining missile fire across his own world. Millions died in the bombardments, tectonic plates shifted, cities crumbled, and only later was the truth revealed: the governor wasn't a man at all. He was the changeling, a trickster daemon of Tsench wearing a human mask. By then it was too late. The millions of deaths had become fuel for daemonic summoning. Warp rifts split open across the planet, vomiting daemons into the ruins. 4 Grey Knight brotherhoods answered the call. Led by Grand Master Dristan Crom and supported by the legendary Arvin Stern, they fought a war not just on the ground but in the skies, where refugee shuttles tried to flee. Here's the darkest part. The changeling was among those refugees, trying to escape hidden in the crowd. What did the Grey Knights do? They destroyed every shuttle. Hundreds of thousands of innocents burned in orbit, sacrificed so the daemon could not slip away. To any outsider, it would seem monstrous. To the Grey Knights, it was the only way. Save billions elsewhere by damning thousands here. And so they did what they always do: they chose survival over compassion, necessity over mercy. Not every battle was so grim in method, though the outcomes were always brutal. Once a psychic signal led a strike force of Grey Knights to the wreckage of an elder craftworld, rotted away by Terranid bioacid. In the ruins lurked the Keeper of Secrets, Enkari, gorging itself on the Elder's soulstones. Brother Captain Pelena led the charge, bringing with him a cadre of purifiers whose azure flames burned like suns. They cornered Enkari inside a crystalline dome, where the daemons slew one of their own, Justicar Anvil Thorn. But in a ritual of blood and fire, the purifiers bound the daemon's strength, and Pelena struck the killing blow. The Grey Knights carried Thorn's body home, prepared a sarcophagus, and laid him to rest with all honors. But during the funeral, they heard something impossible pounding from inside the coffin. Screams. When they opened it, Thorn was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he had survived. Some suspected possession. Others believed he was a miracle. He was interrogated, tortured, tested for years, and in the end, he returned to service, forever called the Eternal. Prophecy even speaks of such a warrior, one who will fall at the foot of the Golden Throne in humanity's final hour. where the thorn is that man remains unknown, but his story is etched deep in Titan's legends. And then there are the massive wars, the ones too big to ignore even in silence. The first war for Armageddon. Here, Angron himself, daemon primarch of the World Eaters, descended with his legion. The Space Wolves fought first, Logan Grimnar leading the charge. But it wasn't enough. The Grey Knights arrived in nearly full force. Paladins, Dreadnoughts, Grandmasters, all deployed. 109 paladins marched that day, and by the end, only 19 remained. They fought Angron directly, blades flashing, psychic power burning, until finally he was banished for 100 years. And then came the Purge. The Inquisition ordered every surviving guardsman, every citizen, every soul who had witnessed the daemons or the Grey Knights to be executed or mind-wiped. The Space Wolves rebelled, refusing to let billions of loyal citizens be slaughtered. For months, Grey Knights and Space Wolves clashed, not with hatred, but with grim determination. The Knights themselves named it the Months of Shame. It tore at their hearts, fighting fellow servants of the Emperor. And yet it was done, because secrecy mattered more than mercy. This is the theme that repeats again and again in their hidden wars. Whether it's a silent planet stripped of voices, a carnival turned into a massacre, a civil war masking a daemon's trick, or a full-scale war with a daemon primarch, the Grey Knights fight in silence, sacrifice without recognition, and make decisions so terrible that no one else would dare. And when the war is done, there are no banners, no feasts, no monuments, just silence, just memory, just the knowledge that somewhere, somehow, the galaxy keeps turning because a handful of silver-armored warriors fought a war no one will ever remember. But if these campaigns show us the brutality of their work, the next part shows us something even heavier, the shame that comes when duty turns inward. When the Grey Knights are forced to fight not just daemons, but their own brothers within the Imperium. The Grey Knights have fought battles no one else could, against enemies that most of the Imperium can't even admit exist. They've banished daemons in silence, sacrificed without recognition, and stood as incorruptible bulwarks against the endless tide of the warp. But sometimes their greatest battles weren't against daemons at all. Sometimes their orders brought them into conflict with their own brothers, and those wars left scars deeper than any warp wound. This is the story of the Months of Shame. It begins in the ashes of the First War for Armageddon. Angron himself, the daemon primarch of the World Eaters, had led his legion and their demonic allies into real space, unleashing carnage on a scale few had ever seen. Armageddon burned, cities crumbled, armies broke, and then came salvation, not just from the Grey Knights, but from the Space Wolves led by Logan Grimnar. Together, they stood against a tide of horrors, and together they achieved the impossible. Angron was banished, his legion shattered, the rift sealed. It was one of the Imperium's greatest victories. But here's the cruel truth: the Imperium couldn't afford to call it a victory at all. Because if word spread that daemons had marched openly, that Angron himself had clawed his way into the material galaxy, then the illusion would crack. Billions would know the truth about chaos. Billions would be corrupted by fear or tempted by whispers. And so, the Inquisition gave its order. Every guardsman, every civilian, every survivor who had seen the battle, millions of loyal citizens had to die. Not because they had done wrong, not because they had turned to chaos, but because they had seen too much. The Inquisition's logic was cold. If a single witness survived, the secret of the warp would spread like wildfire. Better to burn 1 million innocents than risk corruption, touching billions more. The Grey Knights were bound to the Inquisition. They had no choice but to obey. And so the slaughter began. Survivors were rounded up, herded into camps, their pleas ignored, their service forgotten. The very people who had fought bravely beside them were branded liabilities to the Imperium. And when the executions began, the Space Wolves could not stomach it. Logan Grimnar, the Great Wolf, looked at the civilians being dragged to their deaths and said no. Not this time. Not these people. He and his wolves had fought alongside them, bled with them, defended them. To betray them now was an insult to every oath the wolves had ever sworn. Grimnar defied the Inquisition's order and demanded the survivors be spared. The Inquisition's answer was silence, then steel. The Grey Knights were ordered to enforce the purge, and so brother turned against brother. It wasn't a war of hatred. The Grey Knights didn't want to fight the Space Wolves, and the Wolves didn't want to fight the Grey Knights. But the Grey Knights believed their duty was absolute. The Wolves believed their honor was absolute. And in the grimdark galaxy of Warhammer, those absolutes could not coexist. The first clashes were in space. Grey Knight strike cruisers attempted to blockade refugee fleets. Space Wolf warships, proud and defiant, broke those blockades with fang and fury, shielding civilians as they fled. Dozens of Imperial transports burned in orbit, destroyed by wolves who would rather slaughter their fellow Imperials than hand innocent lives over to the Inquisition's executioners. Then came the ground battles. Across outposts, refugee camps and supply routes, the wolves and the knights clashed again and again. The Grey Knights fought with psychic fire, their silver armor gleaming even in the ashes, chanting wards as they struck. The wolves fought with rage, with loyalty to their kin, with the unbreakable spirit of Fenris burning in their hearts. And between them, innocents died in droves, caught between two of the Emperor's finest forces. The Grey Knights called it necessity. The wolves called it betrayal. The breaking point came during a supposed parley. The Inquisition invited Logan Grimnar to negotiate, offering terms of peace in the Hycarian system. Grimnar, weary of bloodshed, agreed, but he brought his wolf guard with him, unwilling to trust entirely. And it turned out he was right not to. The peace was a trap. Inquisitor Kurros and the Grey Knights laid ambush. The order was to capture Grimnar, to break the Space Wolves' resistance by taking their leader. But the wolves are not so easily broken. Grimnar fought his way through, his axe Morikai biting into silver armor, cutting through wards and runes. In that clash he slew Grand Master Joros of the Grey Knights, carving his name into infamy. The betrayal was complete. The parley had turned into slaughter, and whatever fragile trust might have survived was gone. The battles that followed nearly tore the Imperium apart. Siege followed siege, ship after ship burned, and entire worlds became graveyards. In the end, it was only through ancient Fenrisian authority, John the Fell-Handed, the oldest living space marine, revered even by his rivals, that the war ended. His voice carried the weight of centuries, and when he spoke, both sides were forced to listen. The Inquisition pulled back. The wolves stood down. The purge continued, but not at the same scale. Billions still died, but billions more were spared, hidden under the wolves' protection. The Grey Knights called it the months of shame. Not because they failed, but because they succeeded. They obeyed their duty. They did what they were told. And in doing so, they stained their souls with the blood of innocence and the blood of their brothers. It was the price of secrecy, and it has haunted them ever since. What's worse, history itself was buried. To the wider Imperium, the First War for Armageddon is nothing more than a footnote, forgotten, overshadowed by later Orc invasions. Angron's rampage, the sacrifice of the Knights, the defiance of the Wolves, all erased. But within Titan, the Grey Knights still remember, and the Wolves, stubborn as they are, will never forget. To this day, there is tension between the two. Not open war, not hatred, but the memory of betrayal smouldering like coals that never quite cool. That's what makes the months of shame so haunting. It's not just a story of daemons or of secret battles. It's a story of loyalty and duty tearing brothers apart. The Grey Knights chose duty. The Wolves chose honor. And in a galaxy where there are no good answers, both choices brought only blood. It's a reminder that the Grey Knights, for all their incorruptibility, are not perfect. They are not immune to tragedy. They are bound by orders, by secrecy, by necessity so cold it feels inhuman. And sometimes, That necessity forces them to commit acts that scar them just as deeply as any warp wound. And yet, they endure. Even after the months of shame, the Grey Knights continued their vigil. They returned to the shadows, carrying the weight of their choices, still fighting daemons that no one else could face. For them, shame isn't an end. It's just another burden, added to the countless burdens they already bear. That's what makes their story so tragic and so compelling. They are heroes, but heroes who can never be celebrated. They are warriors, but warriors who sometimes must kill their own. And they are incorruptible, but not untouchable. They feel the shame, they carry it, and still they keep fighting. From here, their story turns darker still, not in bloodshed between brothers, but in the secrets hidden at the very heart of Titan. Secrets so dangerous, so final, that they're only to be used at humanity's darkest hour. Every great secret has a deeper secret buried beneath it. And if the Grey Knights themselves are a secret hidden from the Imperium, then within Titan lies something even darker, even more forbidden. It is whispered of only in the highest chambers, spoken of only by the Supreme Grand Master himself, and even then with caution. It is called the Terminus Decree. On the surface it doesn't look like much. Not a sword glowing with psychic fire, not a golden throne, not some engine of war forged in the dark age of technology. No. The Terminus Decree is housed in a simple wooden box. The box is adorned with a golden seal, not just any seal, but one tied directly to the throne of the Emperor of Mankind himself. It sits locked away deep within the purity chambers beneath Mount Anarch, guarded by the most zealous purifiers, protected by wards that would incinerate any who tried to tamper with it. Only the Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights has the right to open it, and even then, only in humanity's darkest hour. So what's inside? That's the question that has haunted the Grey Knights for 10,000 years, and the answer is no one truly knows. There are theories, of course. Endless speculation whispered in the libraries of Titan, written in forbidden margins, argued over by inquisitors who shouldn't even know it exists. The first theory is as chilling as it is final, that the Terminus Decree contains the means to destroy all space marines, perhaps even the Primarchs themselves. According to this legend, during the heresy the Emperor and Malcador foresaw a possibility that the Astartes, for all their loyalty, could one day become the greatest threat to humanity. They had already seen half the legions fall to chaos. They had already witnessed the galaxy burning because of their pride and their flaws. And so they created a final safeguard, a weapon, perhaps a virus, that could erase every Astartes life, loyal or traitor, in one sweeping act. If this is true, then the Grey Knights are not just humanity's protectors. They are also its executioners, the sword hanging over the head of every other chapter. The last safeguard in case the Emperor's children turn on humanity once again. But that's not the only theory. Another whispers that the decree is not a weapon at all, but a command, a failsafe tied to the Golden Throne itself. According to this belief, if the Emperor ever leaves the throne, whether by death, resurrection, or corruption, the Grey Knights are ordered to put him back, by any means necessary. Even if that means fighting through the Adeptus Custodes, even if that means destroying Terra itself. It sounds unthinkable, doesn't it? The idea that the Grey Knights, loyal to the Emperor above all, could be ordered to kill his followers, or even the Emperor himself, if that was what the decree demanded. But that's what makes the mystery so heavy. It's not just about what's inside the box. It's about the weight of responsibility. The Grey Knights live every day knowing that locked in their sanctum is an order that could end everything. Some say it's both theories at once. A weapon capable of wiping out Astartes, tied directly to the fate of the Emperor. A final, terrible choice waiting for the moment when all else has failed. Its very name. Terminus suggests finality, an ending, the last page in humanity's story, or the chance to write a new one. There's even darker speculation. Some whisper that the decree might be tied to the Emperor's own soul. That long ago, during his battle with Horus, he cast off part of himself, his humanity, his emotions, to prevent becoming a god of chaos. That fragment may yet linger, dangerous, unstable, and the decree may be the key to either restoring it or destroying it forever. Others point to Basilio Foe, the deranged scientist of the dark age of technology, who claimed he could create a virus to kill Primarchs and Astartes alike. Perhaps Malcador preserved his work. Perhaps the decree is that virus. And here's the strangest part: the Terminus decree isn't just theory to the Grey Knights. It's a weight that shapes their decisions even now. Supreme Grand Master Kaldor Draigo himself, even cursed to wander the warp, is said to have spoken of it. More recently, Supreme Grand Master Voldus has wrestled with its meaning, wondering if the growing threat of the Great Rift means the time to use it draws near. Imagine that pressure. Every day fighting daemons, watching the galaxy collapse, knowing that locked in your fortress is a key that could either save or destroy everything. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the decree isn't meant to be opened. Maybe it exists as a test, a burden, a reminder that no matter how strong or pure the Grey Knights are, they are still bound by choices greater than themselves. A reminder that the Imperium itself is built on terrible bargains, on survival at any cost. Picture it: a Supreme Grand Master standing in the Purity Chambers, staring at that simple wooden box. Around him, the whispers of daemons echo in the shadows, tempting him to open it, to use it, to unleash its power. And yet he turns away because the time is not yet, because the moment of humanity's darkest hour has not fully come. But what happens when it does? The Terminus decree is the kind of secret that makes you question everything. Are the Grey Knights the ultimate protectors of mankind? Or are they the ones who will end it when the Emperor's plan demands it? It's one of the most unsettling truths about the Grey Knights. They are incorruptible, pure, unyielding. But their loyalty is not to humanity. It's not to the Imperium. It's not even to the Inquisition. Their loyalty is to the Emperor alone, and through him, to whatever plan he and Malcador set in motion 10,000 years ago. If that plan demands mercy, they will give it. If it demands slaughter, they will do it. And if it demands opening the box, they will obey. This is why the Grey Knights are so much more than just daemon slayers. They are the Emperor's final gamble, a blade kept hidden in the shadows, not just to fight the enemies outside, but to hold in reserve against the enemies within, maybe even against the Emperor himself. And that, more than anything, makes their story tragic. They live not just as warriors, but as guardians of a secret so dark it could unmake everything they've ever fought for. Every battle they win, every daemon they banish, every sacrifice they make, it all leads back to that box, that seal, that decree waiting to be opened. The Grey Knights are the Emperor's purest sons. But purity in this universe is not a gift, it's a burden. And no burden is heavier than the one waiting in the Purity Chambers, locked inside a wooden box. Every army dreams of victory. Every general, every soldier, every chapter wants to believe that when the battle is over, the good guys stand tall, the enemy lies broken, and the people cheer their names. But for the Grey Knights, victory doesn't work that way. Victory for them is never clean, it's never celebratory, it's never even remembered. More often than not, victory looks an awful lot like tragedy. That's the paradox of the Grey Knights. They win, but the cost of winning is so high, so heavy, that sometimes they wonder if they've really won at all. Let's go back to that word we used earlier, shame. The months of shame weren't the only time the Grey Knights tasted bitterness. They are just the most infamous. The truth is, almost every campaign the Grey Knights fight leaves behind a shadow, a silence, a sense of loss. Because to defeat daemons, they don't just fight monsters. They fight memories. They fight knowledge. They fight witnesses. Picture this: a hive world under siege, daemons ripping through reality, turning millions into gibbering horrors. The Grey Knights arrive, cut through the warp spawn tide, seal the rift, and restore order. That's victory, right? But then comes the cleanup. The survivors who saw too much executed, entire regiments who fought alongside them, purged or mind-wiped, civilians who prayed in terror as the sky split open, rounded up and silenced. The world is saved. But the people who lived there might not see it that way. To them, their heroes became executioners. That's not an accident. That's the system. The Grey Knights are bound by secrecy, chained to the Inquisition, forced to erase the truth at every turn, and in doing so their victories become paradoxes. Yes, they stop the daemons. But what's left behind is a scarred, frightened, half-empty world, its people broken not just by chaos, but by the Imperium's own hand. Take the example of Garadruid, the festival of slaughter we talked about before. The Grey Knights saved that world from being completely consumed by Slaaneish's daemons. But they also stacked the bodies of innocents onto heretics, using their blood as a seal to close the rift. Imagine being one of the survivors, watching your loved ones' corpses turned into bricks of a warding ritual. Saved, maybe. But the memory of that victory would haunt you forever, if you were even allowed to live long enough to remember. Or think about Rios, where hundreds of thousands of refugees burned in orbit, because the changeling was hiding among them. To the Grey Knights it was a clean solution: kill them all, and the daemon dies too. To the survivors left on the ground it was betrayal. Those who had fought, who had hoped for rescue, were turned into ash in the void. Yes, billions elsewhere were saved. But to the people of Rios, the Grey Knights weren't heroes, they were butchers. And here's the cruelest part. Sometimes the Grey Knights feel it too. They don't say it out loud, they don't write it down. But in the quiet halls of Titan, among the statues of fallen brothers, whispers linger. Was it necessary? Was it right? Did we truly win? The Grey Knights are incorruptible, but incorruptible doesn't mean unfeeling. They carry the weight of every innocent life lost in the name of secrecy, of every victory bought with slaughter. This isn't weakness, it's part of their burden. Unlike the Inquisitors, who see cold calculation as second nature, the Grey Knights still know they are men. Men remade, yes, but still men. And when they strike down civilians or erase loyal soldiers, part of them wonders if they've stepped too far. That's what makes them different. That's why they call it shame, even when the Inquisition calls it duty. Of course, there are victories that feel closer to true triumph. When a greater daemon is banished back to the warp, when a cult is stamped out before it can summon its patron, when an artifact is sealed away in the purity chambers. In those moments, the Grey Knights can feel the rush of certainty, the relief of knowing their sacrifice mattered. But those moments are fleeting, because the warp never stops, daemons always return. And every triumph is temporary. It's like fighting the ocean with a sword. You can slash and banish wave after wave, but the tide always comes back. And every time more people drown before you can reach them. That's what Grey Knight victory feels like. A constant grinding war where every battle is won, but the war itself is never closer to ending. It's why they're so feared by their enemies, yet so distrusted by their allies. To daemons, the Grey Knights are nightmares in silver. To Imperial soldiers, they're shadows that appear, save the day, and then kill everyone who saw them. To the people of the Imperium, they're not heroes. They're not even real. And maybe that's the cruelest paradox of all: to win, they must erase themselves. Yet for all that bitterness, the Grey Knights endure. They carry these contradictions because no one else can. If they faltered, if they chose compassion over secrecy, the Imperium could crumble from within. They don't get to choose between right and wrong. They only choose between survival and extinction. That's the heart of their tragedy. They are champions, but their victories taste like ash. They are protectors, but their protection feels like execution. They are pure, but their purity demands acts that would break anyone else. And still they fight, still they win. Because even a poisoned victory is better than no victory at all. Even a shameful triumph is still a triumph against chaos. And in the grimdark future, survival itself is the only victory that matters. From here, the story of the Grey Knights turns once again toward the shadows, toward the heart of Titan, and the strange relics, chambers, and prisons hidden beneath its mountains. Places where secrets older than the Imperium itself are locked away, and where the knights' battles continue not just on the battlefield, but in the very soul of their chapter. If the Grey Knights themselves are a secret, then Titan is their greatest secret of all. To most of the Imperium, Saturn has its moons, but Titan doesn't exist. Malcador made sure of that during the Heresy. He shrouded it in the warp, erased it from the galaxy, hid it behind wards so powerful that even daemons recoiled. And when it reemerged centuries later, it was no ordinary moon anymore. It was a fortress, a monastery, a vault, a labyrinth of mysteries buried so deep that even the Grey Knights themselves do not fully understand them. Let's step inside. Titan is not warm. It's a frozen world, seas of methane and plains of ice stretching into the distance, with Mount Anarch looming like a black crown. Around that mountain rises the fortress monastery of the Grey Knights, a structure equal parts cathedral and fortress, as much a weapon as a home. Towers climb into the sky like silver spears. Gates carved with runes glow faintly under the cold sun. Every wall hums with psychic wards. Every chamber is steeped in ritual. It is a place designed not just to house warriors, but to hold back nightmares. The core of Titan's fortress is the Aurum, a black spire where the prognosticators chant their endless rituals. These psychers are the Order's eyes, catching even the smallest ripple in the warp. They can sense when daemons stir, when cults prepare a ritual, when corruption festers. Without them, the Grey Knights would always arrive too late. With them, they arrive just in time, or sometimes even earlier, waiting with blades drawn before the rift even opens. But that's only the surface. Deeper still are the trial chambers, where new recruits face ordeals designed to break 99 of every 100. Here the unworthy die screaming. The survivors emerge scarred, stripped of identity and reforged into Grey Knights. And beneath even that lies the Sanctum Sanctorum, the holiest of holies. Imagine a library so vast it stretches downward for levels upon levels, filled with scrolls, grimoires, and data crystals glowing faintly in the dark. Here lies the original Liber Daemonica, the most complete record of chaos ever assembled by mankind. Rites of banishment, wards of protection, descriptions of daemons long forgotten by the galaxy, all of it bound and sealed within this chamber. To read even a fraction of it would drive a normal man insane. To the Grey Knights, it is a weapon of knowledge. Yet even the sanctum is not the deepest secret. For hidden within its chambers are the tesseract labyrinths, small cubes of impossible geometry, artifacts not of the Imperium but of the Necrons. Each one is a perfect prison for a daemon, trapping its essence forever, cutting it off from the warp. With these, the Grey Knights can do the impossible: capture a daemon, hold it, study it. But the number of cubes dwindles, their secrets long lost, their manufacture impossible to replicate. Each one is a treasure beyond price, and every use is a gamble with eternity. And then there are the purity chambers. Few have ever entered them, and fewer still have returned. This is where the purifiers dwell, guarding relics so dangerous they cannot be destroyed, only contained. Here lie cursed weapons, demonic skulls, blades that whisper, masks that scream, tomes bound in human skin, all locked away in vaults sealed with wards. Some say the purity chambers hide something even older, an ancient evil buried beneath Mount Anarch itself. Some whisper it was placed there by the Emperor before the Crusade even began. No one knows for sure. The Grey Knights themselves do not ask too loudly. It is in these depths that the Terminus decree rests, a simple wooden box, unassuming among the horrors, but far more dangerous than any of them. Guarded by purifiers whose souls burn with azure flame, it waits for the day humanity's darkest hour arrives. Every Grand Master knows where it lies. Every Grand Master knows what it means, and yet none dare open it. But Titan is more than relics and prisons. It is also a tomb. Beneath its halls lie the crypts of fallen grey knights, sarcophagi glowing faintly with psychic wards, walls carved with reliefs of their victories. When bodies cannot be recovered, their names are inscribed upon the great memory wall, a basalt monolith glowing with blue fire, where every line tells the story of a hero who died in silence. To walk those halls is to feel the weight of 10,000 years of sacrifice pressing down on you. There are also stranger places. The Warp Nexus, a chamber where psychic energy crackles in the air like lightning, an artifact from the dark age of technology that once helped Malcador hide Titan in the warp. The Chamber of the Fallen Dagger, where recruits spar in brutal combat, remembering the story of a master who challenged his students to take his dagger and died undefeated. The Halls of Champions, lined with statues of grey knight legends, their stone eyes forever watching new generations train beneath them. Each chamber tells a story. Each relic whispers a warning. Titan isn't just a fortress. It's a living reminder of the burden the grey knights carry. Every step through its halls reminds them of what they've lost, what they guard, and what they may one day be forced to unleash. Imagine being a recruit, newly reforged, walking into these places for the first time. You've already survived trials that killed almost everyone beside you. You've already had your past erased. And now you walk through halls filled with screaming relics, burning libraries, cubes that contain daemons clawing at their walls. You kneel in crypts where the silence is heavier than stone. You look upon the box that could end humanity itself. And you realize this is your home now. This is your life. This is your eternity. The fortress of Titan is not a place of comfort. It's not a sanctuary. It's a crucible. It exists to sharpen, to remind, to prepare. The grey knights don't need cheering crowds or banners. They need walls filled with ghosts, relics filled with curses, chambers filled with shame. Because only by remembering the darkness they guard can they keep fighting it. And fight they do. From Titan, the grey knights launch their endless wars, striking out across the galaxy, always in silence, always in secrecy. And though they carry legends, though they wield relics, though they walk halls filled with history, they are always defined by one thing: the burden of their duty. So here we are, at the end of this long journey through shadow. We've walked Titan's frozen halls. We've followed the grey knights through impossible battles. We've seen their victories that feel like tragedies, their secrets that weigh heavier than their swords, and their legends whispered even by daemons themselves. And as we reach the end, one truth remains clear: the grey knights are not like anyone else in the Imperium. They are its shield, yes, but a shield that no one is allowed to see, no one is allowed to thank, no one is allowed to even admit exists. That's the irony of their existence. The Imperium celebrates its heroes loudly. The Ultramarines have monuments carved into stone. The Space Wolves are sung about in sagas. The Blood Angels are painted in murals across cathedral walls. But the grey knights, they are the silent protectors. If they succeed, no one knows. If they fail, everyone dies. There is no middle ground. And maybe that's why their story feels so haunting. Imagine being a warrior who will never be remembered. Imagine fighting not for glory, not for recognition, not even for your brothers, but for the survival of humanity itself. You'll never stand in a parade. You'll never hear your name chanted in a hive city. You'll never have statues built in your honor. In fact, your name will be erased the moment you put on that silver armor. And yet you keep fighting. Because the Emperor willed it. Because humanity needs it. Because without you, the galaxy would already belong to chaos. This is what makes the Grey Knights tragic, but also noble in a way no other chapter can claim. Their purity isn't just resistance to corruption. It's the purity of sacrifice. They gave up not just their lives, but their very identities. They fight knowing they'll be forgotten, knowing they'll be feared by those they save, knowing that every victory will be washed away in silence. And still they endure. When you look at their story as a whole, you start to see them less as warriors and more as symbols. They are proof that the Emperor knew the truth, that chaos could never be defeated, only held at bay. That secrecy and silence would be humanity's only hope. The Grey Knights embody that philosophy. They are weapons sharpened to the finest edge, wielded in darkness, striking enemies the Imperium dares not name. But here's the uncomfortable question: how long can they last? The galaxy is darker now than it has ever been. The Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, has split reality itself in half. Whole sectors of the Imperium are swallowed by warp storms, daemons spilling into real space without warning. Armageddon looks like a skirmish compared to the scale of these new invasions. And the Grey Knights, never more than 1,000 strong, are stretched thinner and thinner, fighting wars on 100 fronts, each one a battle for survival. Even the strongest shield can crack. Even the purest soul can falter under enough weight. The question isn't whether the Grey Knights are incorruptible. It's whether there are enough of them to keep fighting forever. And then there's the Terminus Decree, sitting in its wooden box deep beneath Mount Anarch. A reminder that the Grey Knight's story may not end in victory at all. It may end in one final, terrible act. An act so drastic it could erase everything they've ever fought for. Maybe that's the final irony, that humanity's purest protectors are also its potential executioners. But maybe that's what makes them so compelling. Because the Grey Knights are not just a chapter, they are a paradox. They are hope wrapped in despair, victory stained with tragedy, purity balanced on the edge of destruction. They are living proof of what the Imperium really is: a civilization built not on triumph, but on survival. When you imagine them, picture this: a battlefield lit by fire, daemons howling as they pour through a rift in the sky. And then, from the smoke, silver-armored warriors stride forward. Their blades glow with psychic fire. Their voices chant words that shake the air. They march not with joy, but with grim resolve. They know no one will remember this. They know their allies may die by their own hands when the battle is done. They know that even if they win, it will never be enough. And yet they keep walking. That's the Grey Knights, silent, forgotten, feared by their allies, hated by their enemies, loved by no one, and yet the only thing standing between humanity and damnation. Their story is not about glory. It's about endurance. It's about carrying shame and secrecy, about bearing burdens too heavy for anyone else. It's about fighting wars that will never end, so that the rest of humanity doesn't even have to know they exist. And maybe in that silence is their greatest heroism of all. Because when the Imperium finally reaches its darkest hour, when the galaxy itself trembles, when all hope seems lost, the Grey Knights will still be there. Silent, steadfast, waiting. The shield no one sees, the sword no one names. The Emperor's last secret gamble. The Grey Knights.